Hello, and welcome back to the My First Marathon podcast. My name is Taylor, and today I interview a runner who ran the same first marathon as one of our previous guests. If you remember Ellie's episode, she told the story of training for her first marathon with her college friend, and this is the other side of that story. Since that first marathon, this runner has dipped her toes into speed training, downhill marathon training, and is soon to be running a race every month this year and competing in her first ultra at the end of the year. Lots of great advice in this one and some awesome stories as well, so without further ado, please welcome Lindsey. Lindsey, thank you so much for carving out this some time this weekend. I know you had a race this weekend, so really appreciate it. But excited to talk to you today.
Yes, I'm excited to be here. Fun to finally get this going.
Yeah, for sure. So quick introduction, and then I'll let you take it away. So Lindsey, her first marathon experience is actually the same first marathon experience that Ellie, who's been a guest on the podcast before, had as well. So I think today will be really fun to hear what was going on in your world at the same time. We know what was going on in her world. So,
Yeah.
but before we get there, I'm curious how you got involved in the running world in the first place.
I will probably give credit to a couple people. First one would be my mom, because we ran 5Ks every Mother's Day together. Breast cancer awareness 5K. And I was young enough where I didn't really understand what was going on. I just knew that was Mother's Day and that's what we had to do was we ran this race. So that's kind of how I started. And then met a couple friends along the way who, we were in college, we were running all the fun 5Ks. And then I have another friend named Ellie who runs marathons. And she was like, I think you could run a 10K. And I was like, ooh, that's getting crazy, And then you do the whole thing, you run the 10K and then they're like, I think I could run a half. And then it just escalates from there. So really it was kind of my friends. I was doing it because other people were doing it. And it's pretty much why I continue to do it too, because I just like doing it with all the people that I love. So I just keep doing whatever they're doing, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. It's good to have a community around you. I think running either finds you or you have people that kind of push you into that world. So I think that's great. And when you got into 10Ks and things like that, where were you at in your life? Were you in college, before college? When was that?
That was in college, yeah. We were doing mostly 5Ks and 10Ks in college, and then we ran one or two halves in college. Otherwise, it was really the end of college, getting out of college, and you're like, now what do I do with all my time, And I had money to spend on races that it really kind of escalated from there, but it started in college.
Okay, cool. And in college, I know our fitness levels are much better than they are the older that we get, but were you following any sort of training plans when you were in college or just kind of doing what you could?
Yeah, I'm very type A, and so I love when things are written down, and I'm much more likely to do them if I write it down. So I usually follow some sort of a plan. Even if it's not a plan, I just make it up and write it down because then I know that I'll do it because that's just kind of how I am.
Yeah. So kind of we're loosely following something, but you had something that you were focusing
for sure.
on.
I could check the boxes every week and it was good.
Yeah, I like that too. It's it helps you stay focused, but it also helps you not feel like the whole experience is so overwhelming. I think maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but being able to check little steps off every week definitely makes a big difference.
Yeah, makes a big thing seem like a lot of little things.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Well, cool. And then post college, you said you had a little bit more money to spend on races. You were kind of starting to dip your toes into the half marathon stuff. So how did you kind of progress from there?
Yeah, I liked doing halves where I was. So I was in one of my first rotations out of college. We had kind of different locations, and I lived in Colorado for 5 weeks, and so I did a half marathon there because I was like, well, when else am I going to do this? Yeah, I just like to, wherever I go, it's probably an excuse too. I'm like, oh, I haven't been here. Let's see if there's a race there, and then I can go for the weekend, So it's kind of more about exploring different places is how it started. Excuses to run, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Everybody loves a little runcation, I think. So, did you have any races in mind or any places that you were had on the bucket list when you first started, or was it just kind of whatever opportunity popped up, you were going for it?
It was kind of just whatever opportunity, whatever one looked cool. I like doing kind of different ones. I did the one in Colorado. My friend and I had done a few together, and there was one. We're from Minnesota, North Dakota area. We did one in February, so it was really cold. There was snow. It was kind of terrible, but we had a great time. Just weird ones like that, that you're like, I don't know when I'm ever going to run this again, so let's try it out.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, cool. So when did you kind of get involved in the marathon world then, or when did that thought first come to mind that you were like, I'm going to sign up for one of these things?
I think it's kind of, I don't want to say a normal thought way of thinking because it's not very normal, but I think when you run enough halves, there's unfortunately nothing between the half and the full, really. And
Yeah.
so you're like, I mean, I guess like this is feels like the natural next step. And I feel like I was in a young enough, like vulnerable enough place where I was like, yeah, like that sounds like a good idea. I could do that. So it was kind of just, I think she told you guys we had just like kind of thought it was the craziest thing we'd ever done. And when we signed up, we genuinely, I think part of us knew we could do it and part of us genuinely did not think we could do it. We were like, well, there's only one way to find out, you know? So we kind
Yeah.
of just signed up. We didn't really think about it a lot. We like threw it around a couple times and I was like, well, if we think about it too much, we probably won't do it. So
So just went for it. I love that.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
um, and then where did you go from there? Did you immediately like step into type A? Let's write it all out. Let's figure out how we're going to do this thing, or what was next?
Yeah. I usually like to just write it all out. I had, the week breakdown, you got all the stuff, and I don't even know. Hal Higdon is kind of the guy that I found myself going back to. I like to use his plans, but I kind of like to make them my own too, and so I add and change and whatever. But like I said, as long as it's written down, I generally do it. So that's where we went from there. She
Cool.
remembers, I listened to obviously her episode along with the others. She remembers it a lot better than I do. I think mine's kind of like a book. Like I read a book and then I forget about it. I
Yeah.
remember the race very well. The training, it all blends together. I don't,
Sure.
it's all the same.
Yeah, and I know that you've ran multiple marathons post this first one, so we can definitely
Hmm.
kind of touch on it and then move into everything that you've done since then, since that's a little bit more
Yeah.
fresh.
It'll jog my memory. I'm sure it'll come back to me.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. Do you remember, I know you just mentioned training was a little foggy, but do you remember any like high points of training, any low points or anywhere where you were like gaining confidence, losing confidence, like that kind of thing through training for your first one?
Yeah, I remember a lot of it. I went back and looked at all my like Strava and Instagram so I could jog my own memory. A lot of it, so the race was in October, so a lot of it was in the summer, in Minnesota, which is toasty. It's humid, but it's beautiful. I was up at the lake, so I had some routes like around the lakes and it was really nice. Um, I'm a firm believer that every training cycle has one like very terrible race that makes you rethink everything or very terrible run.
Yeah.
So my 16-mile run was very terrible. I ran it and thought I was going to die, naturally. And I was like, this is the worst idea I've ever had. And then the next weekend you go run 17 and you're like, oh, that was significantly better than 16. So I do remember that run. We had to stop at like 3 stores along the way to keep filling up on water. And I was like, I'm never going to make it. But other than that, it was pretty much smooth sailing. I really like running in that part of the state. So it was very
Yeah.
enjoyable segment.
And that was the first time that you were really pushing yourself beyond 13 miles for the most part. So was there anything like that were feeling a little bit more confident about the marathon the closer that you got, or as you were building distance? Like what was kind of going through your head during that time when you were pushing to a new mileage every single weekend?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of my favorite things. I tell this to people that are starting to run or that I want to get to start to run. It's like the coolest thing about A, starting running or B, training for, a marathon or something new is that everything you do is like more than you did last week. Like every single weekend you're like doing more than you just did. And it's the craziest thing because just when you think you can't do anymore, then you do. And you're like, oh my gosh. So I think that's definitely the coolest part. And I think I was probably more confident in my first marathon training than a lot of other ones just because I was continuously proving to myself that I could do things I didn't think I could do. It gets harder when you've done it before and then it's hard and you're like, I already did this. Why is it so hard? But the first time around, I was like, wow, like we can do this, we're doing the thing
Yeah, it's definitely like a dopamine hit every weekend, every time that
every
you
time.
you hit a new mileage, and then from there you can like chase speed. You can try to do the same distance at a different speed, but it's never going to be the same.
Yeah.
I 100% agree.
Hmm.
Um, cool. Well, let's fast forward a little bit to when we're getting a little bit closer to race day. So I remember from Ellie's episode that you guys did a little bit of a taper before, right?
Hmm.
Like a two
Yeah.
week or something like that.
Yeah.
How was that taper? How were you feeling during that taper period? Because that's the first time you were kind of decreasing miles since you had been building up. So I don't know if you remember like
Right.
what was going through your head at that time.
I think I generally get very confused during my taper periods. Like I
Yeah.
know the first time I was probably extra confused, but I still get confused because you're doing what the paper tells you to do. You're like, this expert told me this is what I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, is this really what we're supposed to do? I did all the things. Everything went well. It was going well. But I was like, I'm like, you want me to run 8 miles and then 26 next weekend? Like that doesn't
Yeah.
feel right. So I feel like generally just confused. I'm like, I hope this is right because I'm doing what they
Yeah.
told me to do, but also really excited. You that's like all you talk about, especially when it's your first one. You like I wanted everybody to know because I just thought it was the most fun thing ever. So it's just anybody you see, you can tell you're like, I'm running my first marathon, and because you're also, I think you're like deep down, you're like really freaking scared.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to tell people that you're excited and you want them to be excited for you. So then I could like calm down a little bit and be like, okay, like I can do this. They think I can do this, like this is going to be good. The more I talked about it, I feel like the better I felt.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely can relate to that for your first experience. I think a lot of people will, of just like projecting, maybe is the best word for it, like
Yes,
projecting their excitement
exactly.
onto other people. Um yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So then from there, what were you traveling to the marathon to, like, was it outside of your hometown for you?
It was, yeah. I think I was probably still up north, so it was probably like 3 hours down in towards Minneapolis.
Okay, cool. And we're
Yeah.
like logistically, you were coming in the day before, a couple days before. What did all that look like?
Yeah, I think it was in Minneapolis and my mom lives in Maple Grove, so it's just a little bit outside Minneapolis. So we were up at the lake, but we have a house, down closer to where it started. So it wasn't really unfamiliar territory. It was nice. I remember morning of, I don't think Ellie told this story, but morning of, I don't even remember where we stayed the night before. Probably at home. Her mom probably brought us, someone's mom. Our moms are the best, so they probably brought us there, but we bought matching shirts naturally. I think they were different colors, but they're the same shirt. And it was like we were ready to go. And we're walking to the start line, and all of a sudden, like, I don't know where my shirt is. I had a shirt on that I wasn't going to run in, but I couldn't find my matching shirt. We're like freaking out, because that was very important. Was we were supposed to have these cute outfits on, right? And we were like, I don't know what happened. She must have turned around or something, and it was like hanging on one of the little construction signs, like along the path. So I must have dropped it, and somebody just picked it up or whatever. She was like, oh my gosh. So that's how the morning started. I probably could have been far more prepared, but I was just ready to go. I was like, let's do this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, just get yourself there and get to the
Yeah,
start line and just figure it out from there.
yeah. I mean, pretty much.
Cool. Well, let's break down the race day for your first marathon. And what were the first? I guess you could break it down however you'd like. If there
Hmm.
different miles were harder or tougher, but what were the first, let's say, like half marathon like for you?
The of the marathon itself.
Yeah.
I remember the very first mile, or not first mile even, before you start, you're standing there and there's like a billion people. And of course, it's the first one we've ever done. So I'm trying to fathom like how this many people are supposed to run this race at one time. Like
Yeah.
logistically, you're looking around, you're like, wow. Get started. That race is really great because it has a lot of support, especially in this beginning. It's in the city, so everybody's there. So it's just like vibes are high. You're trying not to run as fast as you can because you know that that's not a good idea, but you probably are running faster than you should be because that's what I do every time. And we were just feeling really good. I think I don't, she had a less ideal experience, and I think she was dealing with a lot of it internally in the beginning. So I don't think I really had any idea that we were having a less than fun time. I mean, in the beginning, it was really great, because you're really just running off adrenaline. They
Yeah.
say go, and you're like, you're going. So it was good. I think the weather was really nice. And so in my head, everything, I was like, this is going to be good. Like everything's going great. And it's very well organized too. So it was just, there was no bumps in the beginning. Um, we it was probably before the halfway mark that I started to figure out that she was not feeling good.
Mm.
And right away, because our goal was, because we had kind of trained together, like she had said, we were in different spots, but we were chatting the whole time. And I, in no sense of the word, wanted to run this marathon by myself. Like that was not even a little bit ideal to me. And so it never even really crossed my mind that we were not going to run together. We didn't really, because it was our first one, we didn't really have a time goal. We just had a finish goal. So it's not like I was abandoning, any of our goals. And I
Yeah.
genuinely did not want to run by myself. I was like, that does not sound fun at all. We just did this whole training cycle by ourselves. Like, that's no fun. So right away when she was like, I'm not feeling good, I think it was, she probably said it differently, but I think it was around like mile, I don't know, like 10 or 12, maybe something, where she started to say like, I don't know if I can do this. And I was like, oh, Jesus, we got a long ways to go. Like, you can
Yeah.
do this, I'm like, I feel like that's not an option today. We're just going to keep chugging along. Like,
Yeah.
nope, we're doing this. So, yeah, the beginning was when I was like, you did the really high, like great emotions. And then the started a realization that I was like, maybe this is going to be like one of those runs that just isn't perfect. And it is what it is. I
Yeah.
felt really good, but I didn't want to run alone. So I was ready for whatever.
Yeah. You were just gonna stick it out with her no matter what happened there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we were kind of rolling. Then we were kind of rolling with her. We had the different miles. We would do like run walk. Sometimes I would like jog ahead and then wait for her to get to me. And then, like I have a lot of energy, especially during race day. So I was probably super obnoxious and she was probably just wanted to not be there anymore. But we had a great time. Again, crowd support was great. I remember mile 20, of course, was terrible for everybody involved because every time I hit mile 20, like my feet feel like they're going to fall off. I think I have like a billion blisters in all these places. Um, but it was fun. I think it was good.
Yeah. And then I remember from Ellie's story, there was a point where she was actually thinking, like, you go ahead, you go ahead.
Hmm.
I'm just gonna figure this out for myself. Do you remember where that was? I'm trying to remember myself.
I don't really. It wasn't too early. I think she made it a
Hmm.
good portion of the ways, like in the later teens probably.
Okay.
But to me, I don't really remember because I genuinely, like, obviously I wasn't feeling like she was feeling, but I genuinely did not think that was an option. I was like, no, you're okay. Like, you're going to finish this. You feel
Yeah.
terrible, but like, you can do it. Because I knew internally, well, I told myself, I was like, she feels terrible, but if she doesn't finish, then she's going to feel sad and terrible. So I was like, I don't even really remember because I just really thought we were going to do the whole thing. She kept saying like, yeah, she kept saying, you go ahead. And like I said, that was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to run with her. I did not want to just run by myself. So
Right.
it was all the same to me. We were going to stay together no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you feel like it was like for your first marathon? Do you feel like it was a good distraction almost to have somebody who was like maybe doing less than ideal and you having to kind of pick her up and encourage her? Like, was that a good distraction for you?
I think so, probably. And since, you'd only ever run 20 miles, by the time, I think I only ran 20, but by the time you hit 21, it's unknown territory to everybody. So we're all feeling terrible and uncertain. And it's like, I didn't really know what to expect either. So we were running on like my hopes. I was like, it's going to be okay. But like, was it going to be okay? I don't know. So
Yeah.
again, with like earlier, we were talking about the projecting, like when I was excited telling other people like it's going to be great so I could think it was going to be great. I think me telling her like we can do this was great for me because we had to do this because I said we could do this. So more of the projection. If you say it, then it's going to happen. So it was
Yeah.
definitely good.
That's good. That's great. So, and then 20, you said rolls around, like you said, every race, 20 is kind of where the wheels start to fall off for most people.
Hmm.
So what were you saying to yourself, I guess, during that point to push you through the last 6 miles?
Yeah, I think that's pretty tough, especially in the beginning, or in the first one. I think at that point though, it's just like, that you've come so far that no matter what happens, you're going to finish. And I think what was nice about the way we ran and how we were kind of doing like the run walking and how like she had wanted to quit earlier, I was like, we didn't have many goals but to finish, which was awesome because then at 20, when you feel like everything is falling apart, it's like, it's okay. You don't have to run. You don't have to, pick up the speed. You don't have to keep your pace. You just got to keep going. And so it's a really good feeling, especially for your first one. So it worked really well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And then the finish line, did you get to, I know, since with all the distractions and everything, did you get to like feel your finish line feeling for the first one or what was that experience like?
Yeah, we got the full finish line feeling. It was, of course, a bigger race. So they had the big finish line and they had like all the people along the sides. And so you get all excited. I think we were probably crying before we finished for crossed the finish line. But we're kind of criers, so together it was just like I knew it was going to be emotional. I
Yeah.
think we'd probably been tearing up on and on the whole day. And then yeah, we got the whole finish line. I think my mom and brother had been like following around, whatever. And they made it to the finish line. Her family, I'm sure, did too, but I only saw, my family. And so they were there. And so it was awesome. And it's so fun to do the thing again that you said you were going to do and you told everybody you were going to do. Cause I tell myself, like, I'm going to do this, but like really until you cross that finish line, like you don't really know if you're going to do this. Like you
Right.
think you are and you want to, but it's really not until you cross that you're like, all the emotions, you're like, oh, I can finally calm down because I did what I said I was going to do. So it was all still there.
Yeah, so you got to feel it. The energy was there. Ellie made it across the finish line too, which is
Yes.
great.
I think
So
we like ran pretty fast across the finish line too. So she was good. I think she was in her head a little bit, and I think she was obviously feeling upset that she wasn't at the top of her game. But
yeah,
we still were moving, we still finished it very nicely. So it was good.
good. So pretty I won't say uneventful, but pretty smooth first marathon experience. It seems like
Yeah.
for both of you, which is great. And then where did we go from there? Were you immediately thinking like one and done? I'm not never running a marathon again, or did you have thoughts of maybe I'll run this thing back and try it again?
I think I remember vividly after my first half marathon. I was like, I'm never doing that again. That was horrible. And I didn't run a half for a while. I don't think I had that same thought after my first marathon. Because I think because of the way we ran it, I knew that we could run it faster because we
Mm,
didn't really run the full thing. And so I think it was like that automatic, like, we could PR, like the way that we
yeah.
ran the first one was so conservative that we were like set up for success in the future. And I think I was like already excited.
Yeah. Did you have any timeline in mind? Maybe not right after when you were still recovering and stuff for the first one, but
Hmm.
did you have any timeline in mind for when you would want to run your second one or try it again at that point?
Not really. I didn't really have any plans. I think I was still just like amazed that I did it one time.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have any big plans for when I wanted to do the second one. I just knew that I probably could.
Cool. Cool. Well, how did we progress from there? Because I know that you have obviously ran 4 other ones since then. So what did the
Hmm.
timeline look like for when you started like getting back into running? If you didn't have a race on the calendar, like what sort of training were you doing at the time? What did all that look like
Yeah.
after your first one?
Um, so we So that was in October. At the end in May is when I graduated college. And I then COVID hit somewhere along those lines, all kind of
Mm,
a blur. But I didn't get my second marathon in before COVID hit. And then COVID hit and I was like, well, that's kind of puts a damper in, everything.
yeah.
Um, so I was still running a lot because there wasn't a lot else to do. I had got my first job and it was up north in a town that I didn't really know anybody. Um, and so I was just running a lot and I was getting kind of antsy because races weren't really opening up. And I was up in a small town. No, it's a smaller town, but they have a marathon every year. But it was in October. And so this was October of 2020. So COVID was still a thing. And the marathon, I had wanted to do it, but it was very like, they never really said it was going to, you all did like I hope we'll be able to do it, but rolls around. We weren't really going to be able to do it, but I wanted to do it anyway because I think I was getting antsy because I knew that I could PR. And so I was like, let's
Yeah.
get this thing over with, like let's do it. Um, so I decided to do it ended up being virtual, which when I signed up, I knew there was a chance that it would be. But it actually turned out being great because it was virtual, but they set up the course for us. Most of it was
Mm,
around a lake, and it was around a lake that I had been running around for training. I think the lake was like 15 miles. And so all my long runs were around the lake and then some. So they set up the course, but it wasn't a terribly hard course. My friend at the time, Maya, same one that ran the really cold Minnesota race with me, she was like, well, I'll bike with you because she liked to bike.
mm,
And I was like, well,
yeah.
that sounds fun. And then my boyfriend at the time, I was like, you want to bike a marathon, right? Like, that sounds like what you want to do.
Yeah.
He's now my husband, so clearly it worked out. But so they biked with me, which was awesome because I didn't have to carry anything. They carried the music and my phones, and when I took like a layer off, they carried it. Like I had like my own little team. It
Yeah,
was
that's great.
incredible. Yeah, and it was in a place I had loved running the routes, and the weather was great, and so like it was like an incredible virtual marathon. I don't know. I don't think I would opt to do it again now that I know, like what it's like when it's not virtual. But it was awesome. So that was my second one was great. And Yeah, it was great. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean that's probably best case scenario for a COVID years to have
Yeah,
like a race that still set up the course. I'm assuming they didn't do like aid stations or spectators or anything like that. It was just the course that they set
they
up.
right. I think they had a couple. No, I don't think they had aid stations, but there was kind of like Ellie's when she ran her virtual one. There was like a Facebook page still, and there was still
Hmm.
people who also were gonna run it. So they had the like start and finish line like arch. They had that set up.
Okay.
And you'd see like a handful of people along the way, you know. So they probably even had a couple aid stations set up, to be honest, because it was really well run. We just couldn't officially run it, you know, and so it was good. Yeah, they
Yeah.
did a great job.
And I'm assuming you got the PR that you were looking for too for that one.
I did, and I would like it was incredible. Like I ran really fast, and I was like, dang, that's also why I wanted to run it because I was in really good shape, and I knew I
Hmm.
was like speed wise, I was cooking, and I was like, we gotta like do something with this here because I can't let this go without running the marathon because I'm doing so well. So it was
Yeah.
really good. Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
And then did anything change from training for your first marathon to training for your second marathon? Like, was there anything that you incorporated differently in your plan or followed a different plan? Anything different there?
I did incorporate a lot more speed work.
Hmm.
Um, not really I don't really think it was because I wanted, obviously it's to get faster, but I didn't really have a time goal again. I think it's just because that's what I was doing, you know, out of training. I had just been doing a lot more speed work, which obviously that's why I was faster because that's usually works out that way. So I just kept incorporating that. I remember vividly I would have like, I think my husband made that training plan for me out of some like running textbook. He's a dietitian and does sports. So he like has all like the real science stuff. So he had all these numbers down. And I remember having like speed runs in the middle of like a workout and my speed work would end up being like 10 miles because the speed was like mile repeats or like long, and
Mm,
that's when I was like, dang, like speed work for a marathon is so much different than just speed work for fun because it's like speed
right.
and distance. I would like finish a speed workout at 10 miles and I was like, that is absurd, like that is. So I do remember that was different in the second one. I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah. You look down at your watch and you're like, "There's no way." I feel like in
Yeah.
speed work, I don't pay attention to the mileage. I'm just paying attention to the workout. And
No.
you look down and you're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, really been
Like
out here for 2 hours."
that is aggressive.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So incorporated a little bit more speed work, and then obviously that paid off for your second one. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
When were I assume the world's hopefully started to open up where you were
Mhm.
after that virtual marathon? What were the goals after you kind of hit your PR? Like, how did your priorities or your goals shift from there?
I think I went less away from the marathon then. I wasn't like, I'm gonna do another one because
Hmm.
I did what I wanted to do, you know, I ran faster. And so I was like, yeah, well, that was fun. So at that point, I think I was leaned more into the speed because I'm not like a very speedy marathoner. That's a very hard thing to do, you know? So I feel like I find myself either leaning into trying to run faster or trying to run further. And once
Mm,
I generally start building up on mileage, I lose out on my speed. And if I lean into my speed, I generally am not doing as much of the mileage. So I think I leaned more into the speed work because I was feeling good and I was feeling it was fun and it was more exciting at the time. So I think I leaned more into that, did a couple more of the half marathons. I still between that time is when I was in Minnesota again. I didn't really know anybody there. I made one friend there actually because she ran. So that was fun. That's how I make all my friends is just running. So we would run
yeah.
together and she was significantly faster than I was. So it was great because I would be like, yes, like I can keep up with you. And I did it, but that's only because she was there. So more of those kind of just sporadic speed runs. I think I was probably still training, but sometimes I train for nothing. I just like to have it written down.
Yeah.
Um, but I am kind of a creature of habit, and unfortunately, as not as consistent as I would like to be if I don't have a race on the calendar.
Yeah.
So it's kind of my downfall. I kind of have a lot of, I always have something planned because I can't really just, couldn't, at the time at least, couldn't really just do it for fun. I was pretty habitual about all of it.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of people are going to relate to that. I've had a couple guests on here that have said something similar that if they don't have something on the calendar, they're not training really. It's like, I'll go for a run here and there, but it's not really hard to be
Yeah,
consistent when you don't have like an end goal in sight, I guess you could say. I
right.
always props to the runners that run for fun and don't have races on the calendar. I think that's
I
the
know.
elite category of people that I'm not in.
I try not to be surprised when people tell me that. Or like the people that run who don't even really like it that much. They just do it because they know it's good for them. I'm like,
Right.
oh my goodness.
Good for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And so ran your second marathon, and I know when we started talking, you said your third marathon was a less than ideal experience. So how did you
Yeah.
transition from speed work to let me train for a third marathon?
Yeah. So I moved in that time, I moved to Vegas for my
Mhm.
husband's job. And one of the first things I did, we moved in July, which was hot. And one of the first things I did was went on Meetup and I found a run club because I wanted to keep running. But moving
Yeah.
to a new place, I was like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. And I would rather do it with people who know what they're doing. So I found a run club. Um, and it was incredible. It was the best decision I think I've made since moving to Vegas because it's called Las Vegas Runners, and so it's a pretty prominent one of their bigger run clubs. But we've got a lady on there. Her name is Jo, and she's older. She's retired. She's incredible, and she every week since the day I met her, she sends out an email on Sunday with all the runs she's doing throughout the week, and people just join her the days that they want to run, you know. And so it's
Yeah.
this whole thing. So that was when I really first entered the phase of like, I was running and I didn't really have anything on the calendar, but my friends were running. And so I was just, and they were keeping me consistent and I was just running just to run. And it was a really good feeling. I wish I would have come to it sooner, but I don't regret it. It's fine to want to run for something on the calendar because I'm kind of back to that right now. But for a good like year or two, I had races, but it's just because that's what would come up, you know? And so I was just running because my friends were running and because I liked it, you know? And when I didn't want to run and I didn't have a race on the calendar and I'm like, why would I run today? Well, it's because all my friends are running. So here we are, you know? So that was really good. And then of course they're runners. So they always have races and they're always talking about all the things. And so something I got introduced to out here is the Revel race series.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of them.
I haven't.
I had not heard of them either, but they are specifically downhill races.
Oh,
And
okay.
they're like very downhill. Like they're like loss of like a couple thousand feet of elevation every time.
Wow.
And they're in the mountains usually, which is where they get all the downhill. And so they're beautiful. And so we have a couple of those. And there's one in Utah and we all ran the half one year. And like, you can really get cooking running downhill, you know, it's
Sure.
pretty rough on your legs, but like if you can maintain it, like you can really cook down that downhill. And so I was already kind of speedy. And then I hit this downhill half one time and I was like, I could do crazy things on the marathon, which of course the marathon's always crazy. So my third marathon I signed up for was a downhill marathon and it was in Big Bear, California. And my friends were doing mostly the half, but there was a couple that were doing the full. And we have a mountain right outside of Vegas, luckily. And so on Saturdays, we would drive up there and you have to like park cars and then everybody has to get in one car and, you know, drive up like 15, 16, however many miles up the mountain. And then we
Right.
all run down the mountain. And then at the end, someone's got to go back up and get the car. So it's like a
Right.
process,
That's what I was
but
wondering. Yeah, like how you get to the top for a downhill run. I've never it's different.
it's incredibly, and there's
Yeah.
absolutely no way I would have done it on my own. Like again, my friends were doing it, so I was like, thank gosh. Joe
Yeah.
had somebody who was like our aid car, so he would like hop down every 3 miles and stop, and we could like get water and stuff. And so I was living the life. Like they were
Yeah,
taking
that's
good care
great.
of us. Yeah. And so we did all that training for it, and yeah, and the race day came. It was good, but you can run really fast down the hill, and I was cruising. You start at the top and it's really, really cold. So it was like 40 degrees. We all had like our parkas on, you know, and again, like mile 18, 19, I had been going really fast. Well, then you get to the bottom and it's inevitably flat. It has to flatten out somewhere.
Right.
And flat in comparison to downhill is like an uphill, you know, you're like, I'm not moving. Like I have no momentum. We got to the bottom and it was like 85 degrees or something dumb for
Yikes.
November. And I called my husband. I was crying. I was like, this is terrible. I'm never going to finish. Like, it was just all of the drama. I was like, this is the worst thing ever. Of course, I finished, and I still did on paper. It was an incredible marathon. Like, the
Yeah.
time wise, oh, it looked so good. But I thought it was the worst thing ever. I was like, I don't care how fast I just ran. I feel like garbage. So on paper, man, she looked good, but I did not have a good time. And I was like, this is terrible. Yeah. And then I
Yeah.
took my break for marathons for a little bit. And then I was mad because I didn't want to hate the marathon. Like, I really didn't. And I was sad. I was like, we have a bad relationship and I don't want to hate it. And so that's where I ran my fourth marathon, was the same one, but 2 years later. And my only goal was to not hate it, not cry sad tears.
Yeah. What do you think was, I know downhill is obviously a whole other game. It's probably completely different to train for, like you were saying too,
hmm
but what do you think made your third marathon experience leave you with that feeling of like, dang it, I wish I could have done a little bit better there?
I think this one of the hardest things is when you run, not even just the marathon, this can go for any race, but when you run, 75% of the race, even 85% of the race, and the last 10% ruins the whole thing,
Yeah.
I had a very bad finish, and I didn't think about the great training I had, the great training runs, the great first 20 miles. All I could think about were the 6 miles that just ruined the last, 16 weeks. And I was like, and it's hard. At the end of the marathon is very hard. And the end of some half marathons are very hard. And it's just very demoralizing when you train all this stuff and everything's great. And then the end is just covers everything else up. You're like, well, that was all for nothing, and it wasn't. But
Yeah.
at the time it feels like that was just such a waste.
Yeah, yeah, it does suck when it feels like that. I think that goes for training runs too. When you have a fantastic training run, maybe like the week before or something
hmm
like that, and then you have one the next week that completely takes that one. Um,
Yeah.
it does. It's a kind of a gut like sinking type feeling for sure. Um,
Yeah. It's a
and then
bummer as humans
yeah,
that we're just like naturally think that it just erases all the hard work we've already done.
yes, it is a kind of a bummer that we think like that, but it
Yeah.
sounds like it pushed you to run the same race again. So there's a positive in that for sure that you got to go back and
Yeah.
kind of have your redemption there. When
Yeah.
you were like thinking about training the second time around, was there anything that you were thinking you were going to do different to help with that last little bit of the marathon distance?
Yeah. I was gonna rein it in, which is very hard for me, especially when you're going on the downhills. Like, your body just takes over. But I was like, if I want to, you know, make it to the end and feel okay, I need to rein it in the beginning. And which is what I did. And it ended up working out really well. But and it was mostly mental for me. It wasn't really physical
Mm,
because that wasn't the part that was hard. It was the mentality of like, I know you can, mostly during the race, I know you can go faster than this, but only for a certain amount of time. And if you don't want to hit a wall at mile 20 or hit as bad of a wall, like, you really gotta have more discipline in the beginning. It's all just the long game.
yeah. So pulled back on pace just a little bit, and that's
Mhm.
I would imagine for a downhill race. I haven't ran a downhill race like that myself,
Mhm.
but I can imagine that slowing down would actually be harder, right? Like going downhill slower would be harder, I would
Yeah.
think.
It was very hard because your body just wants to pull you faster.
Right,
Really what downhill running is like your legs keeping up with your body pretty much.
right,
And so like your body wants to go and you feel so good because it doesn't feel hard. Your heart rate isn't nearly as high as it is when you're running that fast on flatland. And so it just feels so good. And you got to remember that, like, it feels good now, but later, like, I knew later it was not going to feel good. So I ran it and I was very diligent on like making sure I was slowing down. I stopped at a porta potty. Like, I took my long sleeve off. I was just like, had to physically stop and slow myself down. And I was like, do not mess this up again, because a marathon is a long distance and you can't just redeem yourself the next weekend. Like, you got to be very
right.
diligent. Half marathons, if you have a bad half, I can at least be like, okay, I'll try again, next month or in 8 weeks. Marathons, it's like, this is it. Like, you really got to figure it out in this one. Otherwise, you're gonna have to wait a while to do it again.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. It's like it's not a training cycle that you can just jump right into the next one. I know some people will
Yeah.
run them back to back because you still have that base and you can kind of
Hmm.
like work off of that. But for the most part, yeah, it's a full 16 to 18 week do over that you have to sign yourself
Hmm.
up for again.
Right.
It's a lot for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but glad that you got to go back and have a better experience, so that hopefully that downhill race leaves you with
Yeah.
a better taste in your mouth.
Yeah, and it was really eye-opening because so I ran the first half conservative, and then once I hit like mile 15, I was like, okay, fine, you can go, just like let it go. And I
Yeah,
felt so good towards the end, and I even ran it like a couple minutes slower than I had run the first one. And it wasn't much, but like I said, like that first one looked better on paper, but it was terrible. The second one was so much better. And so it was nice to look back and be like, it's not about how fast you run this race. It's really just
yeah.
about how you feel doing it. And if you're not having a good time, it's not a good race. At least for me. If I'm not having fun, it's terrible. I don't care how great I'm doing. So it was really nice. I no longer hate the marathon, so it's good. It was goal
Yeah.
achieved.
That's good. And that's just I think another testament to like every race can have its own individual goal. Like it doesn't always have to be a speed goal, or it doesn't always have to be a
Hmm.
new distance goal or anything like that. Like it really can just be an arbitrary goal that you put for yourself, because we're
Yeah,
at the end of the day we're running by ourselves and setting these
for
goals
sure.
on our own. So
Yeah.
I think that's great. But cool. And then I want to touch on, because I know you've ran number 5 as well pretty
Hmm.
recently. So I keep asking kind of similar questions, but I'm curious,
Yeah.
like throughout the marathon trainings, what do you feel like from the first 4 that that did you learn that you maybe took to your 5th marathon?
One of the biggest things I always remind myself, I know we already touched on it, but it's okay to have bad training run. They're
Hmm.
not the end of the world. They still suck and they still make you sad, but it no longer like makes me feel like I'm not going to be able to do it. Ironically, my last training block, I didn't have a bad race or a bad run, and I was nervous. I was like, this
Yeah.
means the marathon's going to be the bad one, right? Because I just know that all races are not, or all runs are not perfect. And another thing I've gotten better at, I would like to say I've gotten better at, is since I'm so type A and I like to write everything down, I've gotten a little bit more flexible with my training plans. I'm better at like if I wake up and I have, 6 miles on the calendar and I just don't want to do it today, I'm better at being like, it's okay, I can do it tomorrow, and like shifting around. Whereas before I think I would push myself, especially in the beginning when you just want to do what's right. I would push myself to do exactly what I should be doing because that's what I needed to do, just push through, just do whatever. But sometimes life happens. It doesn't work out. Maybe, you sleep in that day or you have a meeting or something just doesn't. And so I think I listen to a lot of, Coach Bennett from Nike
Hmm.
podcasts and Nike Run,
Yeah.
and he always has such inspirational things to say, but he always talks about like being consistent is not as important as like mentally being in a good headspace. It's the training plan is there for a reason and you should follow it if you can. But if you can't, it's not the end of the world. You're not going to have a worse race because you missed a long run. You're not going to, and
Yeah.
it's again, that's all mental. And so that's what I think is really hardest for me is just like the reminding myself that every little thing does add up, but it's not the end of the world. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect to get to the end goal.
Yeah, there's so many different ways to complete a marathon.
Hmm.
And it sounds like the longer you're running, the more you kind of can take the pressure off of yourself because you know
Right.
what to expect. The first marathon, you don't know what to expect, so you're thinking all or nothing. Like if I don't stick to every single run on this training plan, I can't run this marathon. And I think yeah, that's
Right.
just not the case for the most part.
You want to control everything because if you don't, then it might have been, that one race that, or that one weekend that you didn't do that race. Like maybe that was the reason and it's just not. It's just not
Yeah,
that point blank. And so it's nice to
exactly.
be able to separate it out.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. Well, you kind of just gave some really great advice there, but I'm curious, like, if you could summarize some advice for somebody who's maybe thinking about running their first marathon,
Hmm.
what advice would you give somebody like that?
Let's see. One of my new favorite things, I think this is like karma from my friends were the ones that were like, Lindsay, I think you could run a half marathon. And I was like, no way. So now I found myself being that person. Like I've got friends that don't run or kind of like think about running. And I'm like, well, if you ever want to run, like let me know. And so I think the biggest thing I like to tell people, first when they just start running is to try to do it for fun. If you start from a place if you start running because for any reason other than like you genuinely want to, I think then you start out off on the wrong foot. You want to do it because you think it'll be not even fun, because some people don't think it'll be fun, but you want to do it, for a reason coming from like within yourself. Because if you start for any other reason, you're setting yourself up for failure, really. So basically just get into it. You get into it, get out of it what you put into it. And the good attitude is what really is the biggest thing, because at the end of the day, it's such a mental game, But for marathons, I think finding people to run with, finding a running group, finding, a friend that also runs but lives somewhere else and you can kind of bounce your long runs off of each other. I think running with people though is so important. It's so good. It's so good for the soul, and it's so good to be surrounded by people who like doing the same thing as you. Because I've been a lot of different phases of runners, and in the beginning I didn't run with other people. And arguably, let's say if we're going to look at numbers, right? I was a faster runner when I ran by myself because I did probably more speed work. I was also younger, so I guess that plays into it.
Sure.
But now I do the races on my own sometimes, but now I run because I love being with the people that run. Runners are such great people. And so that's my biggest thing is like, yes, I would love for my friends to start running, or I would love to, for this person to want to run a marathon. But really it's because I want them to become a runner. I want them to find this community of people that's just so fun, like so good across the internet, across any town you're in, no matter where you go, you find people that run. And they're just the best people. And so like, yeah, I want you to do a race because like they're so fun, and who doesn't love having people cheer for you? But really, I just want people to become a runner because I think being a runner is the best. And so I want everybody to get that feeling of community and accomplishment.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it is hard, like as a runner, to kind of reel yourself back with the non-runners in your life, because you want everybody to
Yeah,
like experience the same life-changing stuff that you went through
I
and like feel
do.
the same endorphins that you get to feel and all that. So yeah, I totally get that. I have to
Hmm.
remind myself, okay, everybody will find it in their own time. If they want to do it, they'll do it.
Yeah.
But you want to just like grab them and be like, let's go for a run today.
Hmm. Hmm.
No, but I think that's some really great advice for both new runners and anybody who's maybe early on in their journey too, and kind of trying to find their way in the running community.
Hmm.
Like you said, you mentioned the online community. If you don't have anybody, like if you live in a more rural area or you're a little nervous to join a run club in the beginning, start posting about your journey online too. I've talked about it a couple
Hmm.
times, but like you'll find a community of people even if you don't live somewhere physically close to a run group or something like that.
Yeah.
Runners are, like you said, they're awesome. They'll support you.
I also like we had kind of talked about, the Nike Run Club app
Yeah.
is, I think I think they're like Under Armour. There's probably other ones out there, but those ones are so great because they have their coaches and they do all these guided runs, and the coaches like talk to you the whole time. So it's like you're not alone on this run. And that's really nice. Excuse me. And everybody that is a runner was started somewhere. So everybody started not knowing what was going on. And
Yeah.
that's what I think is so important about community and finding other runners, is that it's scary to start, and everybody has been there. And yeah, that might have been 15 years ago, but I'm sure they still remember what it was like when they had no idea what they were doing. And so that's what's
Right.
really nice, is it feels less scary when other people are like, it might feel kind of like everyone like, yeah, I've been there, but like, no, we really have been there.
Yeah.
And you can
Yeah.
get here, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. That's super inspiring too, to just like have people that are already at, they're a little bit ahead of you and it's somewhere where maybe you want to
Hmm.
be. It's a good to have an example of somebody like that physically in your life for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I'm interested in what's coming up next for you too. So I know you just ran your fifth marathon pretty recently. When
Yeah.
when did you run that marathon?
What month is it? June 22nd or whatever that weekend was. So it was like 3 weeks ago.
Cool. Okay, so
Yeah.
that one's still pretty fresh. Do you have anything coming up on the calendar for the rest of the year, or what are you focusing on right now?
Well, I did this weird thing 2024. I had a friend actually from college who last year she ran a half marathon every month. And I follow her running page on Instagram. And she would post about, like, this is my July half marathon, this is my April. And I was like, God, that sounds fun. So I decided I was going to do it this year. But I had a couple runs on the calendar that weren't half marathons, so I just made it like a race per
Yeah.
month, you know? Looking back, it was kind of expensive. Logistically, I'm not sure. It was kind of a lot, but I'm having a great time. So I just ran my road Ragnar, which was fun. And then I have a half marathon in August, just kind of for fun. So basically the answer is I have something every month for the rest
Yeah.
of the year because I
That's cool.
decided that was a good idea. Um, I just signed up for my big one, I guess, would be I signed up for my first ultra. I'm
Cool.
gonna do a trail 50K because I don't know, because it seemed like a good idea because I wanted to do something different.
Yeah. I think you hit a point like after you've ran a couple of marathons where the roads are either like triathlons and Ironman or ultra and you just kind of like pick a path and go down it.
Yeah, it's a bummer. I think a lot of runners have like run off of a lot of the same like personality traits, you know. I think a lot of us
Yeah.
are type A. I think a lot of us have a lot of the same thought processes. And so it's not like I am by no means bored of the marathon because I still like it and I still think it's very challenging. I will never underestimate the marathon. But I'm like, you know, what else can I do? Like this is
Yeah.
exciting. We were talking about, I love when people start running because everything they do is better than when they did it last time. And when you've run for a long time, you kind of lose that a little bit, you know, and you're like,
Yeah.
I remember when I used to be, you know, fast, or I used to run this far, or I used to have all these things. And so I keep wanting to try new things because I want that feeling back. I'm like craving that
Yeah.
feeling of like doing crazy things I never thought I could do. Because marathons are still crazy. Fast half marathons, slow half marathons, 10Ks, they're all crazy. But I've been that crazy and like I want to try something new. So I see the slope. I see how everybody gets to where they are. Like
For
like
sure.
I'm cruising. I'm cruising along that road.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's very exciting. So what month is that? 50K race coming up.
That is in November.
Okay.
Um, and I have no idea how to train for an ultra. Couldn't tell you what I'm gonna do. But
Yeah.
for my last marathon, I ran it with a different friend who was not in the same town as me. But I trained with other friends who were training for their own marathon. And so I have a handful of friends who have like a regular marathon in November as well. So I was like, well, I can just, you know, like mooch off their long runs. I can just do their long runs with them and then like, I don't know, go for a hike or add a couple miles. Like, haven't really gotten into the logistics part of it yet, but
Yeah.
seemed like a good time because I now, unfortunately, it's very hard for me to run alone. I'm kind of like rely on my
You're
friends a
hooked.
lot.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what can I do that they're doing?
So joining that group to get in your long runs on the weekend, and then you'll just
Yeah.
add whatever you find out you need to add throughout the way.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I'm looking forward to seeing that work out for you. I think it's cool that you're doing
Yeah.
a race every month. That's something that I've seen a couple people who, like you said, have started Instagram pages like 50 states
Mhm.
kind of things and stuff like that. I
Mhm.
think that's just a unique challenge to have on the board. That's pretty cool and keeps things
Yeah,
interesting,
it's
like you
fun.
said.
It's fun and it keeps me like next month I'm going, my friend lives in San Diego and I'm like, oh, well, there's a race in San Diego. Like, can I stay with you? You know? So now like we're going to spend the weekend together just
Cool.
because I wanted to run a race. So again, it's an expensive excuse to do things when
Sure,
I
for
find them
sure.
on the calendar. Yeah. I'm like, oh, well, I have to run a race, you know, because I told myself I did. So might as well go on vacation too.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's really cool. Sweet. Well, I'm looking forward, like I said, to seeing this all play out for you for the rest of the year. And I guess
Yeah.
if anybody wants to follow along with you, where can they find you?
Oh, great question. I'm pretty sure it's Linds_laced up is my Instagram page.
Perfect.
Lindsey Marquette is my name in case you just have to search that. But if you can't tell, I'm a very extroverted person. I love friends. So if you have any really cool races by you, let me know. I'll probably fly out because that's my MO.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll make sure to link it too so people can find you, for sure.
Perfect. Let me know what's
But
going on, where the fun stuff is happening. I'll be there.
yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, last couple questions I have for you are more of
Yeah.
just like data points, I guess you could say. I
Hmm.
like to ask about fuel and shoes at the end because when I was a newer runner, those were a lot of the questions that I had and a lot of the questions that I still get. I always will give the disclaimer: this is your own journey. You should be trying out your own types of fuel and figuring out what works for your
Hmm.
body. Same thing with shoes. But for you personally, what do you like for fuel?
Fuel is really exciting for me. My boyfriend's a dietitian, or my husband, sorry, like I mentioned. And works, he's a sports dietitian. And so he loves all the sciencey stuff. So we've really gotten it down to like a science. So it's really fun to be able to share. But I found that a lot of I can't intake, especially during the marathon, as many like goos or chews or carbs as I should. And
Yeah.
so we put a lot of my carbs in my water pack. We buy like the powder. The brand we have is Vitargo, but it's just like a powdered multi-dextrose. And so it's just carbs essentially. And I mix it in with my electrolytes so then I can just drink it. And it's a lot easier on my stomach. So I drink a lot of my carbs, which is awesome. And then I recently started using the Honey Stinger Goose gels, but I'm blessed with a stomach that kind of handles whatever I try to throw at it, which is really nice because then I'm just kind of like, I don't try anything new during race day, but if anybody has any recommendations, I always try them. My newest fun thing is Nerds gummy clusters. You know,
Yeah.
those little, that's what I like now.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I like, the more I thought about it, especially like marathon running, you know, the gels are expensive and the fuel's
They are.
expensive and it's not that good. And I'm like, wait a second. These nerd clusters are sugar. That's like essentially the same thing, right? So that's my new favorite thing is popping in some nerd clusters here and there. It makes it way more fun too. It's not like, oh, I have to take a
Have to
gel.
take a
It's like
gel. Yeah.
time for candy, you know?
I love that. I know a lot of people swear by the nerd clusters and some other types of candy. So I think that's a great alternative. Like you said, it gets really expensive the more you kind of look
Yeah.
into fuel and stuff like that. And I think you just said too, like they don't always taste good either. We just force ourselves to
No.
eat them because we think we
I think
should. So
we pretend we like them. Like they're not that
yeah,
good, you know? So
no,
they're obviously do their job, but like
yeah,
there's a time and place for them. And again, if something like that hinders your race, you got to find something else because it's not worth it. You know, it's not worth it to try to do what you think you should do if it's not working for you.
yeah, yeah. I'm curious. It's okay if you don't know, but does your husband have any like, since he's a dietitian, does he have any like
hmm
tips and tricks for like how much you should intake on a run or like anything like that that you try to follow, or you just kind of like go based off feel for the most part?
Yeah, he is very science based, and so it's actually kind of crazy the amount of carbs you should be intaking when you're running or when you're just working out. He works at the UFC, so he works with like MMA fighters. So we're
Mm,
not the same, but on some level, an athlete is an athlete, you know, and you need to fuel your body for the work that you want to put out to do. And so, always, always eat something before you run. I know I used to be like, I didn't purposefully fasted run, but I ran in the morning and like I'll be darned if I'm going to wake up early to eat breakfast, you know?
right.
So even if it's a banana or the honey stinger waffles have been what I've been doing, just like one waffle, just like a little bit in your stomach, you know? And then it's like something crazy, like 90 grams of carbs per hour or something if you're marathon training. Now, if you're just generally training, it's not as much, but it's an unreal amount. And so really, I think the biggest thing I've learned is you likely can't overfuel yourself. You'll
Mm-hmm.
feel it if your stomach's not, you know, not tolerating it, but really like your body's going to use up what you give it. And so you really can't overfuel yourself. So don't be afraid to stay fueled because that's how your body works best, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the first time that you properly fuel on like a long run, you really feel the difference, or at least I felt like that
Yeah.
was the case for me. The first time that I like all the pieces connected together, I was like, oh,
hmm
okay, that was a lot easier than what I've been doing
Yeah.
before.
It's crazy because your body will do, you know, whatever you want it to do, you know? So it'll
Right.
run without sleep. It'll run when you're dehydrated. Like it'll do the things. And it's not really until like he'll say, you know, like, oh, like maybe you shouldn't run tomorrow because you haven't had great sleep. And then I run the day after that when I sleep well and I'm like, dang, like it really is that simple sometimes. Like it really is just
Yeah.
like take care of your body. Because some people aren't used to it, you know, and you don't know what you're missing out on because your body does its thing. It's gonna
Exactly.
do what you want it to do. It just isn't gonna do it as well. But if you've never gotten to the point where it's like fueled properly, like you said, you're like, once you do it, you're like, dang, like I do feel great, you know, I'm feeling good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the pieces definitely click together. And
Mhm.
try everything and anything through if you're training for your
Mhm.
first marathon. That's definitely the key. You'll start to figure out what your stomach's okay with and what you maybe should stay away from for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I have friends who like boil potatoes and they like eat those mini potatoes on their run because they don't like the
That's
artificial
crazy.
stuff. I
Yeah.
know. The first time she did it, I was like, and then the more I thought about it, I was like, that makes sense. Like some people obviously need real food, you know, like they
Yeah.
need bananas, they need potatoes, they can't handle all that fancy fake stuff that costs
Yeah.
more money. Like they just need food. And that's I think what's the most important thing is like it doesn't have to be what the running store sells or what your friend uses. So I like that you ask everybody because it's different. Like your body just needs food, especially if you're
Yes.
training. And even when you're not training, before and after, like you've got to fuel it properly because it, like we said, it'll do whatever you want it to do. But if you treat it the right way, like man, it'll really give back to you. The benefit is there.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Cool. And then the other side of that is shoes. What do you love for shoes?
Oh yeah.
How's that kind of like progressed over time, I guess?
Like Ellie, I started out in my Nike Pegasus. I
Yep.
loved them. I got away from them simply because I got a pair of Brooks one time. And again, like like my stomach, my feet are like pretty good with whatever I put on it, which makes it
Mhm.
hard. I wish I had a shoe that worked for me best because it would make it easier. Because every time I want a new shoe, I'm like, ooh, what should I try? But really, I shouldn't. I should just find my shoe and stick with it. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty consistent in Brooks right now just because I like them and I know that they work. It's easy. But I usually ran in like Brooks Adrenaline, and then the other time I found like a Brooks Glycerin and I was like, wait, these feel good too. So I think I'll be able to vary in the brand and then it'll still seem like fun for me, but sticking with like something like a
The
little bit of
general brand.
consistency is probably good. Yeah. So I do like the Brooks, but again, like in the running club, man, people run in everything. So
Yeah.
I love it. I wish that's why I'm like, ooh, those are cute. Maybe I want to try those. Or I'm like, oh, look at those ones. Like maybe I should try those next. But Brooks have been my tried and true, so I gotta give them credit.
Stick with them. Yeah. Do you use a
Yeah.
different shoe for like speed work? Do you have a rotation of any sort, or you just kind of stick to the same like shoe for everything for the most part?
Well, see, so last marathon cycle, I bought two different kinds of Brooks,
Mhm.
one adrenaline and one glycerin, because I was like kind of trying to do my research and glycerins are squishier. And so I think in my head, I was like, somewhere I must have read that like those would be good for speed work. And so I started running in them and I would alternate them mostly because I was running a lot and I was like, man, I'm burning through shoes. And I've always wanted to be the person who like alternates their shoes because that sounds
Yeah.
fancy. But I think I did it completely wrong because I just started to wear them and then I was like, really like these glycerins. So then I ran my marathon in them just because I liked them. So I
Yeah.
did have two pair of shoes last training cycle, but really I think I just had it because I wanted two pair of shoes. I don't think I
Yeah. Yeah.
properly rotated them at all.
Some people swear by it and some people don't. Like I've had every time I
Yeah.
ask the shoe question, some people are like, "You should have a shoe rotation. It's good for your feet to switch it up and all of that," which I'm
Mhm.
sure is 100% right. But I've been a little
Mhm.
bit more similar to you, where I just kind of like pick and stick, and it always sounds great to have a rotation, but I don't really know what I should be doing for a rotation, so then I
Right.
just end up in the same shoe anyways. But
Right,
I
because
think
there's
to
so
each
much
their own.
information out there. Like there's so
Yeah.
much, and you don't really know till you try. And kind of like fueling is a little easier. You can try a goon if it doesn't work,
Yes.
whatever. But like to buy a new pair of kind of shoes to try to commit to a training cycle, and it's just like the marathon. Like you really got to get a good cycle in the shoes before you know how it affects your race. And it's like,
Right.
man, that's a lot of commitment.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, ease into it. You'll find your shoe along the way, I think. And
Yeah, for
I think
sure.
so, I forget who said it the first time, but somebody gave this disclaimer also that like your local running stores also have great return policies. So try it,
Yeah,
and if you don't like
for
it,
sure.
return it. Don't feel like you need to keep it and push through
Right, because you're a runner, and that's, I guess, what we do. And so that's why they have
it.
such great return policies, because they know that
Exactly.
that's the best way to do it is to just try it out.
Exactly. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for walking through all of your experiences, and I think there was a lot of great advice in there for both newer runners and people who've been running for some time now. So appreciate you walking through your whole journey there. That was great.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love it. I love to talk about running. I just think it's the best. So,
Yeah, absolutely. That's why this podcast is so fun for me and for hopefully you guys as well, because we runners love to talk about running. So we just
we
give you a space to
do.
do it. Well, cool. Well, we'll stay in touch for sure, and looking forward
Awesome.
to seeing what's coming up next for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning into another episode. If you're enjoying My First Marathon, it would mean the world to me if you could rate and review the show. And if you or someone you know has ran a marathon and would like to share your story, I have a guest form to fill out in my bio on Instagram. That username is @MyFirstMarathonPod. See you on the next one.